What would you define as heretical in the 21st century?
Yeah, that I love that question so much. So, you know what? I want to go back to the original meaning of the word because the original meaning of the word heretical has a lot of power that I think we've lost over time. So when we go back to the original meaning of the word, it's derived first of all from an ancient Greek word. I can't speak Greek, so I can't pronounce it. Heresis, something like that. So ancient Greek, between 1500 and 300 BC, um, as the language was developing. And what it originally meant then was a choice or something that someone chooses. And then it came to evolve to mean, a school of thought or a group or something that a person chooses. Um, and when we're thinking about that, it really referred to the process where a young person, this would be for young people typically, uh, they would examine the various philosophies to determine how to live. So when you think of the word heresy and heretical that way, what it really meant was that you choose from all of the possibilities that are out there to understand, what is life and why, and the big questions. You choose what makes sense for you based on a study of the thoughts and the philosophies that are out there, which is very, very powerful. But then, of course, over time, especially with the English language as it came in and morphed, the dominance of monotheistic patriarchal religions meant that the religions determined how someone should live. um, and so that the word heretic or heretical got stuck there. Um, Basically meaning if you don't believe what one of the dominant patriarchal religions says is truth with a capital T, you're a heretic. But in fact, that's not the original meaning of the word. And I guess even today, to answer your question, like for today, basically, if we take back the original power of the word, then we're looking at a person thinking through everything that's going on in the world and thinking through all the different ways in which they can choose to approach life. And that may not be mainstream. Then they're labeled as heretical. It may not be mainstream, but it may be what fits for them. So that's how I'm looking at the word heretical, from this context.
Okay, so we go on with the second question. In a world where we are constantly pushed towards desires, how can we find out and then trust our personal will? Any tips on that?
Yes, I guess maybe to start off and ask the question, what do we mean by personal will? So I look at that this way. If you imagine yourself as a tree, you're going to bear certain fruit. Let's put it that way. So your personal will is the tree part, and then the fruit are the things that you do in your life, the things that you choose, which may or may not include some of these desires. But all of this comes back towards what is your original essence, that tree. So for me, the tips would be the very first thing is know thyself. That is the key. Um, and that's not something I think that we're born with. I think that's a process that we go through in life if we put a priority on self understanding and self development. because it's entirely conceivable that if we don't put a priority on self-understanding and self-development, we will never know ourselves really. And so, if we don't know and trust ourselves first, then how can we find out and trust our personal will? So that would be my first tip. I have two tips. My first tip is to put the priority on self development and self understanding, really know thyself. Um, and then the second tip would be to use magic to get clear on what your personal will is. Because it's something that I think is a process. This is for some people, it doesn't always come crystal clear, one day. For some people, it does. But either way, I would say that's a great thing to use magic for, is to determine what your personal will is.
Great. Then, third questions. Libraries are full of books talking about esotericism. In your opinion, what can guide the practitioner into distinguishing what's relevant from what's not?
Yeah, yeah. And an even bigger challenge on top of the libraries is what's relevant and what's not on the internet. uh, because, you know, what are forms of communication now are, of course, still with books, but podcasts and videos, and oh my goodness, there's so many different ways. So, okay, how do we distinguish what's relevant from what's not? Um, I would say, first of all, to pay attention to what gets your attention. Oh, actually, that's an always thing. Always pay attention to what gets your attention. But in this case, in terms of esotericism, what gets your attention? So, what is it? Is it ceremonial magic? Is it astral traveling? Is it planetary magic? Is it witchcraft, alchemy? Whatever it is that you feel drawn to, I would say uh, pick one of those and then choose books on that subject and start reading. But the books that you choose ideally would be ones that are very well annotated, meaning they have really good notes, index, bibliography, list of resources, that sort of thing, because then that shows you that the author, it shows you a lot about how much research and time the author has put into gathering the information to share, right? So pick something that resonates for you, that catches your attention, then start reading, but start with the books that show a lot of work has been done with respect to bibliography and resources and so on, and read just on that one topic until you suddenly are going to realize, oh, I've developed a very good level of theoretical knowledge about this particular topic. And then you're going to be able to discern what's relevant, what's relevant and what's quality from what is superficial and what is irrelevant. And then keep going. So what's the next thing that captures your attention, and honor that and start reading about it. And the same process. Choose the books that are well annotated and indexed and bibliography and resource and that, and keep reading until you now can discern, on that topic, what is quality and what isn't. That's how I would do it.
Thank you. Then, fourth question. What are the three authors that you will suggest to a beginner whose will is to be initiated to esoteric practices, and why?
Yeah, that's a really challenging question. So I'm going to answer it with utmost respect to the thousands of authors that are out there who would be awesome for a beginner. Okay, my first suggestion would be the author Gary Lachman, and that's spelled Lachman. Gary Lachman. He has written at this point, I'm trying to think, I think in the 30s, like 35 books, something like that. on different topics around consciousness and esotericism. He doesn't write for beginners, but he has the widest variety of topics on esotericism that give very solid, factual, non-biased histories and explanations. You know, everything from consciousness and his latest books about dreams, Carl Jung, Hermes Trismegistus, Blavatsky, Crowley, etc., etc. So I would suggest Gary Lockman because of the variety that gives you such a good, solid, non-biased historical base in such a wide variety of different esoteric thought. And the way he writes makes you think. That's the other really important thing. So yeah, so that would be my first suggestion, would be Gary Lockman from that perspective to get the scope, a wide scope of esotericism. And then, you know, from the perspective of what witches and occultists and magicians do, two of the main things are magic and divination. So then I'm going to look at those two separately. So for magic, because it is such a umbrella term, so many things fall under that. I'm going to offer two authors. I'm going to say Margot Adler. So Margot Adler, Adler. She wrote the book Drawing Down the Moon, and that looks at a really wide spectrum of practices, esoteric practices, that falls under what we would typically call witchcraft or paganism. And then another, you know, kind of not the extreme of this, but another end of the spectrum would be high magic. And so for that, I would recommend the book Techniques of High Magic by Francis King and Stephen Skinner, but actually anything that these two authors have written in the area of ceremonial magic and high magic. So the third thing would be divination. And divination, again, it's another huge umbrella term. Many things fall under that. I'm just going to pick two that are the most well known, I believe, tarot and astrology. And so for tarot, I would recommend Mary Greer, Greer. She has aside from the books that she's written, she has a phenomenal blog that she keeps updated with incredible history and articles and a variety of viewpoints. So yeah, for tarot, I would go for Mary Greer as a starting point. And then for astrology, I would go for Nicholas Campion, Campion. And maybe start with his History of Western Astrology, volumes 1 and 2. And that will just open the floodgates. So those are my thoughts.
Again, thank you. And then, I mean, you can also repeat authors if it's the case. But then, what are the three authors that more than anyone else shaped your vision on the occult, and why?
Yeah. So first of all, I'll just mention that in terms of my personal vision, everything is a hypothesis. So hypothesis meaning it is a starting point, a proposal for further exploration and discussion. Um, if if an occultist or an occult group says that they have the truth, or that theirs is the right or the best or the correct school or system or temple or whatever, I would say run. Because we can't even explain how we got here on the planet, why we're here, and what happens after we're here, without resorting to faith. So yeah, it's all a hypothesis. So having said that, I would say my first biggest influence was Aleister Crowley. And I know that there's, some people love him, some people hate him, everything in between. He was this, he was that. I get it. I respect that. But again, if we took everybody apart, we wouldn't have many people left to talk about being, having a lot of influence on the occult. So Aleister Crowley, I mean, to get dedicated his entire existence and his whole life to the occult. And for me, I think it comes down to this, that he said, it's the aim of religion and the method of science. And that to me is a critical piece, because the aim of religion is to answer those questions. How did we get here? Why are we here? What happens after we die? These are huge questions. And and I I want to know. I want to know the answer to those questions, if that's possible. Probably not, but anyway, if it's possible. So agree. Yes, I think the occult, and magic has, for me, the aim of religion. I use it for those purposes. But it's not just the aim of religion, it's the method of science. So I want to make sure I'm not deluding myself. I want to make sure that I'm a clear thinker and that I'm tracking everything, and that what I see unfolding before me can make sense, not just on an emotional level, but to my rational mind as well. So I would say Aleister Crowley, everything that he wrote to me comes back to the aim of religion, the method of science, in terms of a huge influence. And then another influence is Dion Fortune. So she's recognized as, one of the most significant occultists and ceremonial magicians in the early 20th centuries. And for me, what I really appreciated about her is how she explored the Western mystery tradition in her novels. So, Moon Magic, Sea Priestess, Goat Foot God, all of her novels. Not that the ones that weren't novels aren't important, but that really captured me. Um, and she was a huge influence. Again, doesn't mean I agree with everything, doesn't mean that people don't have things to say about her that they don't like. Yep. Yes, we're complex. And then the third one is Colin Wilson. So Colin Wilson is an English author and philosopher, and he has he has presented the philosophy of new existentialism. Um, so he's not an occultist per se, although he did write the book The Occult, which is, I think, the best researched and annotated book that's ever been written on the occult. And chasing his leads in bibliography and so on kept me busy for years, literally. So Colin Wilson did write the book The Occult, but for me, why he's significant is because of his philosophy of new existentialism. And new existentialism, like, really quickly put, sees life as an adventure, an intellectual adventure, an experiential adventure, if you will, that aims at a real command and control of human existence, meaning you are in charge of it, your life. You are fully responsible for it. He didn't say there is no such thing as ghosts or entities or whatever. He didn't say that. He said, it's your life, you're in charge. Make it great. um, and so that to me was, hugely important, because that informed all of my interest and practice in the occult, for most of the beginning of my adult life right up until today. um, and I would also mention that uh, if you take away, in left hand path philosophy, if you take away gods, deities, so Satan, Lucifer, Set, Lilith, Hecate, if you take those all away, you are kind of left with what Colin Wilson said all along. um, So I would suggest, if you're interested in pursuing that, to read his series. It's called the Outsider series, and to read up on that. So those are the three authors for me: Aleister Crowley, Dion Fortune, and Colin Wilson.
Thank you. Then this is a tricky one.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it looks simple, but still.
Yep.
In your opinion, what defines a witch nowadays and what distinguishes her or him from a no witch person?
Yeah. Yes. So this is only my opinion. This is not fact and not truth. Okay. So this is I'll answer this. This is how I answer it for myself. Right. Okay. So we have society, whatever society you're in, and society has certain values. And for me, a witch is someone who is aware that he, she, they, because there's no, gender attached to this, of course, someone who is aware that he has powers or abilities or senses in addition to or beyond what is within the typical realm of what society values. So, societal value might be around, you should have a partner, you should have a career, you should have a house, you should have a car. I mean, those are some of the values. Of course, there are others that are much more meaningful. But I think that a witch is someone who looks at that and says, may or may not meet my values. Um, but I am aware that there's more. There's more than this. I can feel it inside me, and I have abilities that propel me there. And I seem to have powers even, and I certainly have senses to go beyond society's values. And so I would say that in that case, a witch is part of a spiritual lineage through all cultures, throughout all times that we're aware of. There was always this group of people, whether they were called astrologers or priests and priestesses, shamans, oracles, et cetera, in all cultures. And I think that a witch is part of that lineage. And because they have these abilities and these senses and these powers of things that are beyond what society values, and on top of that they want to interact with the natural world, um, so the planet, what grows on the planet and lives on the planet, that's not human. They want to interact with that world and non-material beings. So uh, you know uh, beings that are not human, that are not animal. We can call them spirits, we can call them whatever we want to call them. That's a very culture dependent terminology. But they want to interact with them. So to me, that's what a witch is. Someone, again, who's got these abilities and powers and senses beyond the typical realm of society's values, and they want to interact with the natural world and with non-material beings, um, in the pursuit of how they will weave their world, right? The pursuit of their will, or how they will weave their world. And in so doing, they are part of a spiritual lineage that I was mentioning earlier. But the big differentiator here between someone who's a witch and someone who isn't is that they do it. They put the work into it. So I would, for me, someone who isn't a witch is someone who has no interest in these things, obviously, right? Or someone who does have interest in them, but they don't put the work into it. They don't develop it. Um, so, there's a lot of, you know, cool aesthetics about the witch look. Lots of stuff we can get on TikTok and social media. That's not the work. The work is something that is your entire life, and that you put as a priority, to dedicate yourself to put that work into it. So that to me is the big difference. If you don't have any interest in these things, then obviously, okay, not a witch. But you may have an interest in it, but you don't put the work into it. That's cool, right? Like, be who you are. But then I would not say that that is someone who's a witch either, even though they might have an interest in it.
That was illuminating.
Well,
So, other than being a professional astrologist and witchcrafter, you are a specialist on conflict resolution and a certified trauma informed practitioner. How has your experience as a witch influenced these other important part of your work?
hmm well, first of all, I'll say that I am very much, personally, very much against doing any kind of magic or spellcraft or anything that causes another person to do something that they haven't agreed to. So the first thing that I will say is that ethically, I have very clear ethical boundaries. I never put my practice onto clients or students or anything like that. But that doesn't mean that my being an astrologer, and a witch, doesn't influence the work that I do in that professional life. My intuition is very highly developed, so I can use that in situations that are it's very helpful to me. I seem to be able to pick up very, very quickly what people are feeling, and because I can do that, I can help them to support them to articulate how they're feeling. That's an example. I seem to be able to get a very fast understanding of what's really going on underneath the surface, and so then I can honor that ability, and I can support clients to, to explore what's really going on for them. But I really put a strict boundary. I don't bring my abilities um, to influence people. I really try hard not to do that. Um, but on the other hand, my professional life is an extension of my magical life. So my will, right, my personal will, capital W, the purpose or meaning that I choose for my life is to contribute to the well-being of humans. Okay, not everybody, obviously, but just a few people. But that's my purpose, to contribute to the well-being of humanity in some small way, and to the natural world as well. Um, so because of that, I, I chose that was one of the reasons why I chose to go into this field in the first place, because it is a way that I can work with people that is supportive and helpful and compassionate. And it's also a way that I live. So I live very much in tune with nature and the natural world. And so in that way, these aspects have informed the work that I do.
Thank you for sharing.
Mm.
It's really appreciated. And then a new book by you and Shandy Ezeki. Is that correct?
Asuka.
Is it ask? Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
Shandy Ask Bouscatier
Yeah.
is on its way to our bookshelves.
Yeah.
So, what is the book about?
Okay, so that book is being put out by Anathema Publishing, which I'm very honored to be associated with, because they have uh, international reputation for quality, a really beautiful work. Um, so the book is called The Serpent Icons, a sorceress distortion of the Tarot de Marseille Major Arcana. So what it is, it's a book, but also a deck of cards, 32 cards, and Shandi is the artist of the cards that are just gorgeous, just beautiful and powerful, and they're a nice large size as well. So we have the book and we have the card deck. And basically, what we've done is taken the major arcana of the Tarot de Marseille, which is rooted in, of the day, rooted in the Catholic repression of the day, and we've distorted it. So we have turned each of the cards is offering a different way of approaching um, that which choose that part of society which wants us to repress ourselves. So the book starts off with looking at the philosophy of these cards and our thinking behind it. So I won't go into the whole thing, but we look at the philosophy of it, and then we have each card, and each card has a text that accompanies it. But it's not like a tarot deck, for example, where you have a text that explains the card. It's not meant to be, a formula. But there is a text that accompanies each card. And the idea here is that it's meant to get us thinking about the original conversation that we started off with. What does it mean to be heretical? So we have the philosophy, then we have the cards, and there are text that goes with each card. And then we have a whole section on a grimoire on rituals. So I've written a ritual to go with each card. So what people can do is, if they want to, they can look at this ritual for each card and do it. The rituals are specifically designed to increase self-understanding and self-awareness and critical thinking and all of that good stuff that is necessary as a foundation for being a powerful magician, because we are our most powerful magical tool. So the grimoire portion of the book is directed specifically to developing one's power, internal power as a magician, using the cards as tools and using magic in doing that. And then the last part of the book is divination. So we take a look, that's not the purpose of the book, but we do take a look at how can you use these cards for divination. So it's an adventure. This book is an adventure, right? It's not something that you read. It's something that you do. And it's not something that you do, just in terms of a divination with a tarot deck. No, you do rituals with it. And anyway, I don't want to spoil it, but we go into a lot of the reader, if they choose to, can do a lot of work that accompanies the book and the cards that will support them in getting stronger and more aware and more self-honoring as a magician.
Okay, so we can't wait for it.
Thank you.
Then we're coming to the end of our conversation. So 2 last questions.
Mm-hmm.
The first one, as Occulture Conference, we do organize events, both live and online, to bring occult practitioners in circles of esoteric knowledge sharing. In your opinion, what is the importance of collective experiences like those ones?
Mm-hmm. So very important. Human beings, we need meaning, right? We need meaning, and I think that the occult realms is one of, well, for me, it is the way to explore meaning. So human beings need social interaction around things that are meaningful for them. So with the Occulture live and webinar scenarios, people can have conversations. They can connect with each other around things that are meaningful for them. To me, what could be more meaningful than the exploration of the occult realms in many respects? And so then, we can meet people that we resonate with. Maybe we'll end up working with them, as magical partners, or in some other way. We'll learn from them. Um, we hear speakers. We hear the thoughts of the participants in the conferences and the webinars, and they're going to have a whole variety of perspectives on philosophy and practice of the occult. So, so it's incredibly rich. So for me, this is an absolutely beautiful thing to do, and it's a real honor to be involved. I was at the first Occulture conference in Berlin. I think it was 20. I can't remember anymore. 2018. It was so much fun. It was so great. So yeah, super important for collective experiences, because we learn and we grow, and we meet people that could become very important for our future learning and growing.
Okay, so we came to the last question, because 2 days webinar of 4 hours each awaits us on 12th and 13th of March. What will the webinar be about, and what preparatory information would you give to the practitioners who already bought their tickets and the ones that are going to?
Okay. So, so the 2 days are broken up into a few different portions. So it starts off with looking at the whole idea of what do we mean by the word heretical, and specifically heretical witchcraft. So there's a whole piece on that, that we'll go into in great detail. Um, and then we look at we start to look at astrology. Of course, astrology is a massive undertaking. It, took me years to get my certification. So this is not a superficial topic. I'm not treating it that way. However, I do want people to, if they already know something about it, fantastic. If they don't, that's fantastic. I want them to have a look at how can we use astrology uh, in many different ways towards the practice of heretical witchcraft. So we're going to look at, each individual will have their natal chart. Now that is something that I'll talk about a little bit more in a second. But we're going to be looking at individual people's natal charts, anonymously, of course, and looking at ways in which their natal chart is giving them information as to the practice of witchcraft, the practice of the occult, magic, the whole realm, the whole esoteric realm. What does their chart say about that? What does their natal chart say about that? And can they use that information? The answer is yes, they can. And then we go. So that's really about, that's the know thyself piece, right? The natal chart can give a lot of information on the know thyself piece, because once you have that, then we go into the next stage, which is looking at your will. So that's a small w and a capital W. So for your will, then, how can you use astrological information in your natal chart, but also for planning things and for deciding things, in terms of doing spells, doing rituals, doing any kind of occult work, doing making talismans and effigies and that sort of thing. So it's really it's a journey. We're going to start off with wrapping our heads around what do we mean by heretical witchcraft, and then looking at the natal charts, looking at astrology, what is it, making sure everybody's got a clear understanding of that, and then looking at natal charts and how we can use the information that is in the individual's natal chart uh, towards the know thyself piece. And that information will then help to better inform how we can use astrology in general for planning and executing spell and ritual and effigy and talisman type of work. So that's what the 2 days are for. The preparatory information, it should be on the website. So on the website, it suggests that if people don't already know the basics of astrology, I've given links to where they can go and get some really good information, because as we were talking about before, how do you know what's quality? How do you know what's relevant? There's so much out there. So there's one website that is definitely quality and has very good foundational information. So follow what's on, what's on the outline of the webinar. It'll tell you where to go, what to read to prepare. And then the other thing to prepare will be, if people want, because of course they can say no, that's totally up to them. But if they want, we can coordinate that I get their birth data. I don't need their name, so it's anonymous. I can get their birth data and create a natal chart for them that I will then email to them, so that for the duration of this webinar, these 2 days, they have their natal chart, and because that'll be an essential piece of information. So that's how they can prepare. They would need to get in touch with me. Can go on my website, helenavanl.com, and you can see how to get in touch with me there, and let me know that you are a participant, and that'll of course be confirmed with Occulture, and I'll do up the natal chart and send it to you, and then you can have that as a really important piece of the webinar.